At 3:12 a.m. in Merriwood, Colorado, a neighbor's home camera captured a sudden bloom of orange in the Ellison driveway as a compact SUV ignited from the rear wheel well. 9 minutes later, firefighters forced the front door open and moved, through a corridor of smoke and cooled sprinkler mist. In the kitchen, a granite-topped island glistened. In the family room beyond, a safe sat tipped on its side with its door open and hinges intact. In the primary bedroom upstairs, 34-year-old Natalie Ellison lay on the mattress with a shallow pulse, an oxygen mask sealed over her face, and a faint chemical smell rising from the sheets. Her husband, Aaron Ellison, stood in the hallway, with an abrasion on his cheek and the sleeve torn on his T-shirt. Their children slept at a neighbor's house evacuated through a side gate minutes after the first engine arrived. By 4:02 a.m., crews knocked down the vehicle fire. The interior smoke thinned. Paramedics moved Natalie to a gurney, recorded a low blood pressure, and noted pinpoint pupils. A pill organizer lay overturned on the nightstand with 2 compartments ajar. In the mudroom, a broken window pane glittered. In the sink, not on the floor, and the sill carried a smooth edge with no splinters. In the office, a laptop sat face down on the rug with its screen spidered, and a 4-camera home system displayed 3 live feeds and 1 black tile marked disconnected. Police circled the perimeter. The rear fence gate latch hung open but showed no footprints in damp soil beyond. The safe's carpet imprint was undisturbed except where it had tipped in place. By sunrise, the house had transitioned from emergency to evidence. A single question set the direction. Why a vehicle fire, a staged break-in, and an incapacitated homeowner converged in one night, without a path in the lawn and without a plan that held under light. Merriwood sits on the Front Range, 25 miles south of Denver, a grid of cul-de-sacs, trailheads, and new construction. The Ellison home stood on a corner lot with a side entry garage, a cedar privacy fence, and a basketball hoop over clean concrete. Inside lived Aaron and Natalie Ellison and their 2 children, Sophie and Liam. From the street, the family fit the neighborhood pattern: dual incomes, Friday soccer, a mid-size SUV, a hybrid sedan, and delivery boxes on the porch by dusk. Aaron worked in residential real estate. Mid-tier listings, steady commissions, a reputation for punctual showings. He kept a tight calendar and logged mileage in a spiral notebook in the glove compartment. Natalie managed an in-house events team for a regional hospital network, coordinating conferences and vendor contracts. She maintained lists, balanced vendors, and kept color-coded folders in a drawer labeled Home, Work, and Other. Their closest regular presence outside family was Natalie's best friend since college, Sienna Ward. She lived 2 blocks away, kept a spare key for pet sitting, and moved comfortably between the kitchen island and the pantry when she visited. On paper, Sienna worked as a freelance brand consultant who moved between projects and favored late-night deadlines. The families overlapped at school runs, weekend cookouts, and shared holiday photos. Nothing on the surface suggested how their proximity would be used or how it would erode the house from the inside. The day before, the fire tracked like any weekday. At 7:21 a.m., the hybrid left the driveway with Natalie at the wheel. At 7:53, Aaron pulled the SUV out toward a listing across town. A package arrived at 10:06 and sat on the porch, a small logo, for a lab supply distributor stamped in blue. At 12:18 p.m., the SUV returned. At 1:32, Natalie's hybrid pulled in behind it. A Ring camera across the street recorded both cars settling and the motion-activated light cycling once. Inside, the family routine unfolded. Liam's backpack hit the hook by the garage door. Sophie's soccer cleats clattered on the laundry. Tile. By 6:40, the kitchen camera saw a 3-person flow. Natalie at the stove, Aaron at the sink, and Sienna stepping in with a covered dish from the side door. The clip ended with 3 plates on the island and a casserole spoon in the sink. At 7:28, the feed froze for 6 seconds and resumed. At 7:41, a notification showed a firmware update scheduled for 2:02 a.m. By 8:30, children brushed teeth and moved to bed. At 9:05, the side door opened again and closed softly. At 9:18, the office light clicked off. At 90:52, the garage motion. Sensor registered movement. At 10:07, the mudroom camera recorded a shadow crossing. At 10:12, the office camera captured a hand moving across the desk toward the laptop's webcam, and then the image cut to black. The other feeds remained live. At 10:23, the thermostat adjusted down 2 degrees. The sprinkler system program loaded its test mode and then stopped. The home settled. The first event hit at 2:58 a.m. A flare at the rear wheel of the SUV in the driveway bloomed and then intensified into flame. A neighbor's camera picked it up. At 3:01, the Ellison sprinkler control turned on zones 1 and 2, front lawn and side yard, but not the backyard where the hose bib sat. At 3:03, the door sensor chime sounded at the mudroom internal door, then fell silent. At 3:05, the mudroom window alarm notified for a break, but the shards collected later would be found rinsed in the sink. Inside the home, the sequence accelerated. In the primary bedroom, Natalie shifted once on the bed, then stopped moving as the chemical odor later noted by paramedics rose from the sheets. In the hall, Aaron's footprint pattern moved from bedroom to stairs to kitchen and back. The office. Docker opened, the laptop was flipped face down, and the screen fractured against the rug. The safe in the family room, a small fire-resistant model bolted to a platform, sat upright at 2:00 a.m. By 3:10, it lay on its side, door open. The bolt holes in the platform showed clean, intact threads with no tearing. The safe had not been pried from metal anchors. It had been unbolted. The vehicle fire triggered the neighbor's call at 3:12. Fire crews arrived within 9 minutes and knocked the fire down in under 2. Police entered behind them and cleared rooms. The children left with a neighbor through the side gate. Paramedics found Natalie with low blood pressure and narrowed pupils and moved her to the living room, then to a gurney. They administered oxygen and prepared transport. Aaron stated he had attempted to put out the car fire with a kitchen extinguisher but reported a jam. The extinguisher later showed no discharge residue. The immediate aftermath shifted from rescue to assessment. The garage interior was dry. The office contained a disabled camera and a broken laptop. The mudroom window had a replaced pane. The cut edges were clean, consistent with an earlier repair rather than a fresh break. The broken glass in the sink indicated an after-the-fact staging attempt. The safe's door was open with the combination dial unscarred. The code had been used rather than forced. The night in the yard told its own version. The back fence gate stood unlatched, but the ground beyond showed no shoe prints in soft soil. The side yard sprinklers soaked the grass, and no arcs of displaced water pattern appeared. The lawn's edges were undisturbed. The attempt to simulate a forced entry through the mudroom window put fragments in the wrong place. The attempt to simulate an external ignition put fire where someone could see it and call quickly. At 4:02, crews declared the fire out. At 4:18, paramedics left with Natalie. At 4:26, officers taped off the driveway and collected the extinguisher, the pill organizer, the safe's owner manual, and the lab supply package from the porch. At 5:03, the sun broke a line on the ridge. The hybrid's hood beaded with sprinkler water. The SUV's rear quarter panel blackened. The house cooled. Only the staging remained where it had been placed, waiting for someone to match each detail to the next. Detective Mara Ortiz took the scene at 6:10 a.m., split the work into tracks, and assigned teams: fire origin, interior scene, digital systems, and financial sweep. She started outside with the vehicle fire. The origin point centered on the rear, passenger wheel well. Investigators recovered a melted plastic fragment lodged behind the liner. The fragment matched a common remote ignition device sold online as a demonstration kit. An accelerant test on the driveway read positive for a light petroleum distillate. No pour path led to the house. The ignition was localized and deliberate. Inside, the office camera's ribbon cable had been disconnected at the board and bent back into place to appear intact. The laptop screen fracture radiated from a single-drop impact to the rug, inconsistent with the struggle. The mudroom window's fresh break alert conflicted with the discovered glass shards in the sink. Residue analysis found soap film. The pane had been broken, cleaned, and displayed, not shattered during entry. The safe's platform bolts were removed using a socket that fit cleanly. The wood showed no shear. The safe door had no pry marks. The code had unlocked it. The safe's interior contained insurance documents, passports, and a jewelry box with the top layer intact and an empty lower tray. Paramedics' notes on Natalie triggered a separate path. Pinpoint pupils and low blood pressure suggested opioid, arm exposure. Toxicology later confirmed a strong sedative and traces of fentanyl analog. The overturned pill organizer showed 2 compartments open, a standard bedtime supplement, and a prescription for intermittent insomnia. The lab supply package on the porch contained sterile syringes and sealed vials labeled saline. The receipt inside listed a rush order placed under a new customer profile with the Ellison address. Digital forensics imaged the home router, thermostat, sprinkler controller, and camera hub. Logs showed a firmware update queued for 2 a.m. on the interior cameras, consistent with the 7:28 p.m. schedule entry. The office camera had been manually disabled at 10:12 p.m. The sprinkler controller executed a manual run on zones 1 and 2 at 3:01 a.m., not connected to any fire suppression logic. The thermostat change at 10:23 p.m. aligned with manual input from the bedroom keypad. Vehicle telematics for the SUV recorded door statuses up to 9:55 p.m., then stopped when the vehicle powered down for the night. The ignition device fragment matched a marketplace kit delivered to a P.O. box in a neighboring town 3 weeks earlier. The purchaser used a prepaid card. The shipping name was generic. A round of subpoenaed footage in the post office lobby yielded a blurred figure in a ball cap at the kiosk. The height and gait were nonspecific. The house told more through absence. No pry marks on exterior doors, no disturbed mulch under windows, no footprints past the unlatched back gate, no soot migration into the garage. An attempted misdirection had been applied without the detail required to hold under routine lab work. Ortiz moved to context. Aaron's commission deposits over the past 6 months had flattened. 2 sales fell through in inspection. Natalie's work remained steady with an upcoming conference. Credit card statements showed a set of cash-like purchases, money orders, hardware, and a lab supply charge spread over 3 weeks in amounts just under fraud alert thresholds. A bank transfer of $9,800 moved out of the joint account to a new LLC registered 3 months earlier, Cressida Brand Co., managed by Sienna Ward. Interviews began. Aaron described waking to a flash outside, seeing the SUV on fire, running to the kitchen for the extinguisher, finding it jammed, then checking on Natalie, who would not wake. He said he called 911 after moving toward the hallway and seeing smoke. His cheek abrasion, he stated, came from bumping a door frame. He added that the safe had been tipped in panic, not to remove items. He did not explain the open lower tray. Sienna presented as a bystander and a friend. She said she had dropped off dinner and left before 9:30 p.m. She said she received a text from Aaron about the fire at 3:20 a.m. and walked over as crews were, clearing because she kept a spare key for the back fence. She said she used it to help move the children to the neighbors. Her phone log reflected a 3:23 a.m. inbound and a short outgoing at 3:27 a.m. Her key ring carried a brass key, stamped, with the fence's hardware brand. The gate, however, required no key from inside. The children stayed with relatives. Natalie stabilized under medical care and remained unconscious for 24 hours. Toxicology returned a profile that did not match her prescriptions. Nurses. documented an IV insertion mark inconsistent with routine outpatient care. A nurse remembered seeing a small puncture on the inside of the elbow without bruising consistent with a fresh clinical draw. Digital tracks expanded. The home camera firmware, Update Q, had been set by a device on the home network using admin credentials. The admin email reset link had been sent at 6:12 p.m. the previous day to Natalie's personal account and then forwarded to a second account that did not belong to either spouse. That second account, when traced, had been created with a phone number used by Sienna on a vendor registration 6 months earlier. The camera hub's Mac whitelist contained the hybrid sedan's infotainment system, a tablet, 2 phones, and a device labeled Guest. The Guest device appeared on the network. Between 7:18 and 7:44 p.m., Ortiz conducted a walkback on access points. The spare key Sienna held fit the side door and the fence gate. The lock showed recent wear. The lab supply order had been placed from an IP address associated with a coffee shop 3 blocks from Sienna's townhouse. A camera in that shop showed Sienna paying cash at the counter during the order window. The receipt in the lab supply box bore a customer name that did not match either Ellison. The handwriting on the box's internal note matched a series of Post-its found in Sienna's kitchen junk drawer during a consent search for the spare key. A storage unit expense of $71 appeared on Sienna's card at a facility near the interstate. A warrant opened Unit 204. Inside, event banners and display stands, a rolling toolbox, a case of blank gift cards, and a small lockbox. The lockbox held 3 SIM cards, a prepaid Visa with a remaining balance, a tube of adhesive used for glass repairs, and a screwdriver set with sockets. One socket fit the safe's platform bolts. Labels inside the toolbox sorted bits by size, and application. A plastic envelope contained cutout templates for a mudroom window pane, traced on grid paper. Another folder held a printed code sheet with 4-digit sequences paired to names. The Ellison safe code, flagged with a star, appeared on the sheet. The safe code's presence reframed access. Ortiz pulled text strings from cloud backups and found a thread between Natalie and Sienna from 2 months earlier. It listed a set of household passwords and codes for emergencies. The exchange was normal in tone and intended for convenience. The code sheet in the storage unit converted that convenience into a map. A second unit in the same facility rented under an alias contained a carton labeled Conference. Inside, Ortiz found lanyards, badges, adhesive sleeves, and 2 reflective vests. A gym bag at the bottom contained nitrile gloves, a roll of painter's tape, a glass cutter, and a small butane torch with a scorch pattern on its nozzle shield consistent with tests on a wheel well liner. The torch model matched the burn pattern on the SUV. The prepaid card used for the ignition device purchase had a register slip inside the gym bag with a timestamp that matched the post office kiosk footage day. By day 3, the puzzle formed. An outline. The fire was a distraction and an insurance event. The break-in was staged. The safe was opened with a known code, and the lower tray was emptied, not scattered. The sedative and fentanyl analog exposure incapacitated Natalie prior to the fire. The lab supplies and syringe vials provided the method. The admin reset and firmware scheduling provided the blind spots. The spare keys and toolkits provided entry and exit with minimal trace. Ortiz focused the flow toward 2 people with access and proximity: Aaron, who lived there and moved through the house during the event window, and Sienna, who held codes and keys and purchased tools that matched the scene. The pattern of cash-like buys, the new LLC tied to Sienna with the Ellison's money, and the storage units with tailored contents tightened the field. The investigation had not yet assigned who initiated each movement. It had identified who could, who did, and how. The next step would expose why Sienna's presence threaded through each point where the house's defenses turned soft and where the family's structure began to fail. The first twist surfaced from an unrelated repair. A smart lock vendor pushed logs from a warranty ticket Natalie had opened 3 weeks earlier. The logs showed repeated failed attempts at 2:07 a.m. on a night when the Ellisons were out of town and Sienna had checked on the dog. The failures cycled through 4 known house codes in order. A 5th attempt succeeded with a master override that did not belong to the Ellisons. The override had been programmed using an installer code available only during an initial setup, or during a service window. The vendor confirmed an installer login had been used at 11:41 a.m., the day before the failures. The service request had been initiated from a laptop using a VPN exit node associated with a co-working space where Sienna maintained a desk under a month-to-month agreement. The installer time slot overlapped with a window when Aaron was with clients across town and Natalie was in meetings. The route placed Sienna at the center of both access and timing. The second twist arrived from the hospital's compliance office. Natalie had handled conference vendor lists for years. One of the approved vendors for a hospitality suite contract was a new entrant, Cressida Brand Co. The LLC paperwork traced to Sienna. The deposit for the contract had been paid from the Ellisons' joint account through an invoice email that spoofed the hospital's domain and appeared to come from a trusted contact. Ortiz sat with the hospital IT auditor, who confirmed the spoof originated from a home IP on Sienna's street. The routing header aligned with a template saved on a thumb drive recovered from Sienna's storage unit. The best friend had inserted her company into a paid role and used the family's account to fund it, in motion weeks before the night of the fire. The third twist came from a micro camera. A nursery shelf camera the Ellisons used intermittently stored its video on a micro SD card. The card had not been removed. A clip from a week earlier showed Sienna alone in the hallway outside the primary bedroom, glancing into the room, then kneeling to tape a thin strip under the keypad of the thermostat. The strip was a simple opaque blocker placed over the motion sensor on the thermostat, designed to keep the screen dark when someone adjusted it manually. The purpose was not to hide a person, it was to hide a change. Days later, someone dialed. The thermostat down at 10:23 p.m. without waking the backlight that would normally tell a sleeping spouse someone was at the panel. The fourth twist came from the children's routine. A GPS trace from Sophie's school tablet, checked for attendance verification, showed a brief connection to the Ellison home Wi-Fi at 2:55 a.m. on the night of the fire. The signal strength reading indicated the tablet was near the kitchen island. It had been left there earlier for a homework upload. At 2:55 a.m., the device woke briefly when it detected activity on the network. The unit's motion sensor, though not an alarm, provided a crude step count. It captured 2 short accelerations and 1 stop. The pattern matched someone setting down the tablet, not a child moving. The trace time aligned with the sequence that placed an actor in the kitchen, near the extinguisher that was later found undischarged. The fifth twist emerged from an older event. 6 months earlier, a home on the next block reported a minor break-in with no loss. The pane was cut cleanly. The alarm was triggered and then canceled by someone who knew the code. The homeowners had been away, and their friend had checked the house. The report went nowhere. The lock brand matched the Ellisons. The window pane size matched the template found in Sienna's storage unit. The friend listed on the police. Report was Sienna. The sixth twist involved an insurance binder. 3 weeks before the fire, a rider had been added to the Ellisons' auto policy covering a rental SUV for 7 days. The policyholder signature was Aaron's name, signed electronically from a device that normally used Sienna's home Wi-Fi. The rental had been picked up for 2 days and returned, no incident noted, but a rear wheel well liner had been replaced due to a reported defect. The shop invoice showed a small cut in the liner. The rental location bordered a self-service car wash with vacuums and pressure wands. The camera at the wash recorded a compact SUV under a bay light at 11:06 p.m. on the night of the liner replacement. The driver's posture and height matched Sienna. The seventh twist connected a prior identity. A county records clerk flagged. that Sienna had legally changed her surname 8 years earlier after a civil case involving a dissolved marketing partnership. The partner alleged Sienna had diverted small client payments through duplicate invoices sent to personal emails she had created for those clients. The case settled. The paper path was thin, but the pattern of administrative control reappeared. Create a channel, route small amounts, avoid alerts. The Cressida Brand LLC, the hospital vendor slot, and the invoice email template reflected that structure. The eighth twist tied to Aaron. His mileage log included an entry at 11:45 p.m. 2 nights before the incident, a 12-mile round trip, labeled Client Drop. The route's traffic cameras showed the SUV near an industrial park where Sienna's storage facility sat. A toll reader captured the license plate at 11:58 p.m. Timestamps placed Aaron near the storage units when, according to his calendar, he had no appointments. When confronted with the timeline, he stated later that he had been on an errand and did not recall specifics. He appeared on no cameras entering the facility. The entry used a gate code. The code typed at the panel matched the last 4 digits, of Sienna's prepaid card. The ninth twist arrived from a handwritten list in Natalie's work folder labeled Other. It recorded small anomalies over 2 months: a missing lanyard box, a double charge on a supply order, and a gate code changed without notice. The entries were plain and stacked to the side of the family's life. The list ended a week before the incident with a note. Ask S about the vendor change. The letter S matched Sienna's initial and placed a direct line between the hospital vendor addition and Natalie's attention. The final twist connected the IV exposure. An adhesive residue on the inside of Natalie's elbow matched a brand of small transparent dressings stocked at a clinic Sienna had consulted for on a past project. The dressings were also available online, but the unit number on the batch pulled in medical supply distribution mapped to the same lab supplier that had delivered the box on the porch. The saline vials inside the box had been swapped with similar vials containing trace fentanyl analog. Fingerprints on the box were partial and smudged. The shipping label glue carried a latent print ridge fragment consistent with Sienna's thumb, taken later during booking. The odds did not assign guilt alone. The accumulation did. The revelations shifted perspective. The best friend's role moved from helper to handler. The access points were not accidents. The devices were not broken. They were adjusted. The window was not a breach. It was a prop. The safe did not give way under force. It opened under code. The family car did not combust from a defect. A torch met a treated liner. The hospital vendor slot did not appear from nowhere. It came through a template and a shell company. The family's money did not wander. It moved through an LLC 2 blocks away. The investigation stepped back and assembled the sequence with the new frame. Sienna obtained codes under the pretext of emergency planning, programmed access with an installer login during a service window, seeded a vendor role to draw funds, stocked tools and disposables in a rented unit, and rehearsed a pain repair on a neighbor's house months earlier. She cued a camera firmware update for blind spots, placed an opaque strip on a thermostat to obscure a manual change, and used a torch to light the SUV. The sedative and analog exposure incapacitated Natalie before the fire. The safe opened. With a known code, the lower tray emptied, and the laptop staged as broken. The window break-in was rinsed and displayed. The gate stood open to suggest escape. The extinguisher sat clean to suggest failure. The children moved out a side gate, under a neighbor's arm. The best friend crossed between kitchens with a key. The downward slope of the Ellison family unfolded not from a single night, but from a series of small permissions and entries that began months earlier and ran under ordinary labels: spare key, emergency info, vendor help, conference materials, errand. Each one was a step. Together, they were the root. Charges came in layers. Police arrested Sienna Ward on counts of attempted first-degree murder, arson, first-degree burglary, tampering with physical evidence, fraud, and identity theft. Aaron Ellison was arrested on counts of conspiracy to commit, fraud, tampering with evidence, and accessory to arson. Prosecutors presented the case as a coordinated sequence designed to incapacitate Natalie, stage a break-in and fire, extract secured items, and route funds through a friendly LLC. Pre-trial motions set the boundaries. The defense moved to suppress the storage unit contents, the smart lock logs, and the hospital vendor emails, arguing a lack of nexus and overbroad warrants. The court denied suppression on the unit searches, citing direct financial links, time-stamped access codes, and specific items named in warrants. It admitted the lock logs under business records exceptions and chain of custody evidence. It admitted the vendor emails as authenticated records with metadata establishing origination and routing. The prosecution structured the trial around a timeline. Fire investigators testified to the ignition device fragment, the accelerant residue, and the torch nozzle pattern. A toolmark expert matched the socket in Sienna's toolbox to scuff traces on the safe platform bolts. A network analyst walked the jury through the admin reset at 6:12 p.m., the 2:00 a.m. firmware queue, the 10:12 p.m. office camera disable, and the 3:01 a.m. manual sprinkler run. A lock vendor representative explained the installer code access and the failed code attempts at 2:07 a.m. weeks earlier. A digital forensics examiner tied Sienna's co-working space laptop IP to the installer session. Medical testimony established the sedative and fentanyl analog in Natalie's blood and the non-clinical IV insertion mark. A supply chain witness traced the lab box to Sienna's coffee shop order. The micro-camera clip showed Sienna affixing the opaque strip under the thermostat keypad. A forensic accountant traced transfers to Cressida Brand Co., lined them up against spoofed invoices, and identified the shell vendor placement. The neighbor's camera footage set the fire window and captured the torch-like flare. The defense for Sienna argued that she was a frequent helper whose fingerprints and access were explainable, that the storage unit was a legitimate staging area for event work, and that the toolbox contents matched her trade. They questioned the lack of direct footage of Sienna inside the Ellison home during the critical window. They pointed at Aaron's movements and financial strain. They suggested that Aaron had used Sienna's resources without her consent, and that her presence before and after was routine neighbor support. Aaron's defense argued he was a bystander overwhelmed by cascading events, that he moved through the house attempting to respond to a car fire and an unresponsive spouse, and that he didn't trigger any of the systems. They challenged the significance of his late-night drive near the storage facility and stated he had made a client drop. They acknowledged poor judgment on funds but denied foreknowledge of violence. The prosecution answered with sequence and redundancy. It showed Sienna's spare key, the code sheet with the safe combination, the installer access and MAC whitelist changes, the template invoices, the co-working space IP logs, the torch nozzle pattern, the pane template traced on grid, paper, the adhesive tube for glass repair, and the matching socket for safe bolts. It showed the hospital's vendor ad form with routing metadata, the coffee shop camera during the lab box order, and the prepaid card slip inside the gym bag. It placed Aaron at the storage facility gate through license plate reads and at home, moving at key times by step counts collected from his fitness tracker, synced on the kitchen island tablet at 2:55 a.m. Prosecutors established motive only as framework for decisions, then returned to action. The jury did not need a theory of intent beyond the sequence that produced an incapacitated homeowner, a fire staged for attention, a safe opened by code, and funds rerouted. The best friend's role was not incidental. It ran through the devices, the locks, the storage caches, and the vendor tables. Verdicts reflected the pattern. The jury found Sienna Ward guilty on attempted first-degree murder, arson, burglary, tampering with evidence, fraud, and identity theft. The court sentenced her to a combined term of 42 years, structured with consecutive time on violent charges and concurrent time on financial counts, with restitution ordered to the Ellison family and the hospital network. The jury found Aaron Ellison guilty on conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory to arson, and not guilty on attempted murder. He received a 10-year sentence with 5 suspended mandatory supervision and a prohibition on managing client funds post-release. Impact. In Merriwood registered invisible adjustments. Neighborhood groups tightened access settings. Homeowners separated camera systems from the main network and installed independent storage. Spare keys migrated to lockboxes with audit trails. The hospital reviewed vendor onboarding, installed domain protection on email, and instituted dual authorization on high-dollar invoices. The Ellison children moved to their grandparents' home pending family court proceedings. The SUV's charred outline left the driveway. The mudroom window pane was replaced with laminated glass. The safe was re-anchored with new bolts. The legal close did not reverse the sequence. It preserved it in transcripts and exhibits. The downfall did not come from a stranger in the night. It came from a friend with a keyring and a storage unit. The Ellison case closed on actions, not theories. A vehicle fire ignited where a camera could see it. A window broke where it could be rinsed. A safe opened with a known code, then tipped for effect. A camera went dark by hand. A thermostat dimmed. Without a glow, a syringe left a clean puncture that matched a batch number. The family's funds moved through a company 2 blocks away with their address on an invoice routed through a spoofed domain. The children left under a neighbor's arm as crews cleared smoke. The best friend walked the line between helper and handler until the details revealed the role. The courtroom converted the sequence into a record. Guilty on attempted first-degree murder, arson, burglary, tampering, fraud, and identity theft for the best friend. Guilty on conspiracy and accessory counts for the husband. Sentences entered, restitution ordered, custody shifted. The house repaired. The adjustments spread across the cul-de-sac. Independent storage for cameras, audited vendor ads, keys returned to lockboxes, installer codes rotated and logged. Consider the triggers that turned suspicion into proof. A torch pattern in a wheel well, a socket that fit stripped bolts, an opaque strip under a thermostat keypad, an installer login originating from a co-working desk, a pane template traced on grid paper, a code sheet copied from an emergency text thread, a phone waking on a kitchen island at 2:55 a.m., a lab box addressed to a home and ordered from a coffee shop. None carried weight alone. Together, they built the track that led back to the person with access, time, and tools. The downfall of a family did not begin at 3:12 a.m. It began the day a spare key changed hands and a code moved from a phone into a folder. In Merriwood, a best friend's secret role did not hide in shadows. It hid in routine.